and I'm Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. Welcome to the program. Historically, the Roma community in Ukraine has, like Roma in many other Eastern European states and the entirety of Europe, faced widespread discrimination in society, including in employment and education. However, the problems for Roma have dramatically worsened since the war in Eastern Ukraine began. So to help us understand the issues, joining us in the studio today is Zemfira Kondur, the Vice President of Chiricli Roma Women's Fund. She's been working on Roma issues in Ukraine for close to 20 years, and she has also personally advocated on behalf of the Roma at the Ukrainian Parliament, the United Nations, a number of EU institutions, and the Council of Europe. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I know you go by Zola. Tell us about this.
Yeah, well, Zola is a very unique Romani name, and it shows the history and the way of movement of Roma people throughout the world, because it's South African name.
Wow. So it shows that the long history and the movement of the Roma. And the organization's name, I know that also means something.
Chiricli. Chiricli means the bird, because when we've been thinking about the name and what name we can give to NGO, and then one of the founders of the NGO was my mom. As a mother, she said, I want to have a meaning of the bird, because the bird is taking care of her children.
Oh, wonderful. So this is the organization that aims at helping to take care of Roma here in Ukraine. But I know that's not the only reason it's here.
That's true, because the idea of our NGO and the mission is to advocate on Romani women, children, and Roma population in general in Ukraine and many other European countries, because unfortunately many Roma do not have voice, or they do not have possibility of political participation or participation in general, and that's why they're invisible and their voices are not heard.
And how long has the organization been running?
Well, we started in a very small town in Ismail, which is on the south of Ukraine, on the border with Romania, and that was in 1993.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then later we moved to Odessa, where we had already our regional NGO, so it worked for the region of Odessa. And later, when we moved to Kiev, because we've been growing up and getting stronger and much better, we registered our international Roma Women Fund, Chiricli. So that was in 2003.
2003.
Yeah.
And so what size population does the organization serve here in Ukraine, and what services do you provide?
Mm-hmm. Well, in Ukraine, in general, just to give an idea to people who are watching us, how many Roma we have in Ukraine, according to official data, we have about 48,000 Roma living in Ukraine. But according to data that was collected by Roma, NGOs, Roma mediators, and other international organizations, we have up to 400,000 Roma living in Ukraine. Our NGO covers 12 regions of Ukraine, and before the war, we also worked in Donetsk and Lugansk region and Crimea as well. Now, unfortunately, we cannot cover Crimea and all the cities in Donetsk and Lugansk region, but still we are trying to be in touch with Roma who are still staying in that area, at least to collect the information and to provide it to relevant authorities.
And of course, with this very big discrepancy between the reported number, 48,000, and the number that you know of, 400,000. I mean, this comes from historical distrust of authorities, but I know that's not the only reason. There are some issues with receiving documents and passports.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. So one of the work that we are doing with Roma people in Ukraine is helping to register and to obtain passports and birth certificates, because we have many families not just individuals, but families without documents. And for example, when the grandmother didn't have any documents and didn't register even birth certificate and passports, then she delivers, for example, 5 children without any documents, and that children also then having their children. So it's like a generation without documents, and that's why they're kind of invisible for our country and for our government, and they cannot be, for example, voters during the elections and etc. So this is what we are doing. We have a network of Roma mediators. These are people who are working every day in the communities, helping people to solve different problems. For example, with registering birth certificates or passports, or if people do not speak the language, then they will go with the person to doctor or social service to translate and to explain, for example. Or they work with the teachers and schools to help to make sure that children attending the school, and for example, if they have cases of discrimination, then these mediators are solving these issues. They're mediating between children or parents and parents of Roma families. So the work they're doing is amazing, and it's absolutely, I think that without these people, without Roma mediators and Roma NGOs, our people would really, how to say, they would suffer more, I would say. Yeah.
And we talked about a bit beforehand about, and you were saying that if to look at you, we would not know that you were Roma. And this, I think we talked a bit about, this is a large issue with stereotypes and with people, how people see and the experiences people have with Roma.
Yeah, that's true. For example, people at the streets, when they see, for example, Roma like me, they would never think, they would never understand that we are Roma, and that's why they look at us at the rest of the Ukrainians living in the country. But when they see women traditionally dressed, then they immediately have this paranoia that these people will steal something or will harm them somehow. And this the consequences of the stereotypes and fears they have towards Roma, because I think it comes just from not knowing us, not knowing our culture, our traditions, and why we may look differently. I mean, just the dresses, we don't look differently. We may be dressed in our traditional clothes, and that's why we may cause some fears or something. But this is what we lack in our country and many other countries, is a positive stories and more information about Roma, educated Roma, people who are working at different state positions, for example, having jobs at local authorities, local administrations, or being teachers. And
the issue being that the people who are often marginalized and the visible face you see, often, unfortunately, what people remember are the story they heard of someone being robbed by someone in traditional dress, or that happening to them, and that becomes the idea and the stigma that that's the only type of Romas that are, and that people in the Roma community do not want to assimilate into the culture, to go to school, to have regular jobs. But it's not that simple.
It's not, and not all people can understand that. You know, I'm traveling a lot to different regions, and I'm having meetings with people in the communities and with local authorities, mayors, governors, and etc. And every time they ask me this question about, do Roma really want to integrate? Do they want to change their life? Because we don't believe they really want to do that. And then I have to explain them, because it's not that easy, exactly as you said, because when you don't have money and you want to send your child to school, sometimes it's not possible because they don't have shoes to go, especially in winter time. Or when the child is discriminated at school, then the child do not want to go again to school because he or she is suffering there. Or, for example, in Transcarpathia, in Uzhgorod, and in many other cities in that region, we have, in the hospitals, we have separate rooms only for Roma. This is the segregation.
Yes.
Or, for example, when I was in one settlement and I've been trying several hours to call a taxi to go to city center, I wasn't able to do that because as soon as the taxi drivers were hearing the address, they were telling me, sorry, we will not come. And I spent several hours trying just to get a taxi to leave the community. So, for example, if the woman or any person need an emergency help, how you can get out of the community to get to hospital if even the emergency, the ambulance is not coming there?
So even emergency services, or what about the relationship with the police?
With the police,
well,
it's different. It's very different because we have different dynamic in our country. Several years ago, it was really bad because they were doing this mass checkups in the houses in the night or very early in the morning, and etc. They were stopping people at the streets and taking them to the police department, making fingerprinting and etc. So now it's different. Now it's not at that stage anymore. Good. But we have different problem. If you heard, we had the murder of Roma man in Kharkiv region several months ago, just maybe 3 months ago, and the police wasn't really investigating this case until the NGOs decided to stand up and fight for that, for the proper investigation. Or just when we had the pogrom in Odessa region, and the police officers were just watching and following this group of people destroying Roma houses. They were following them from one house to another.
And so, and what we see, and this is, I think we can help our viewers relate, maybe even Americans, the idea of how in certain areas Native Americans are seen and discriminated against. And when you isolate communities, when you treat them with just blanket discrimination, it leads to ways where people have no alternatives to being able to, they want to go to school, they want to earn positions, but discrimination is so great, it forces people into situations that they don't want to be in.
You're absolutely right, and now I'm thinking about people that I've been meeting during the last 2-3 years, and I've seen very talented young women, mothers, and unfortunately they do not have education. But if they would be educated, I think they would achieve a better result. They would give better life to their children. They could be maybe even local counselors because they're really from the nature, you know, they were born as very talented people.
I'm so happy that we've had you on today, and hopefully this has helped to be able to give a better perspective to our viewers about Roma culture and to help end some of this discrimination. It's definitely helped me better understand. Thank you so much for being with us today, Zoya. And you've been watching Head to Head.